The hard place, like a wind from Goldland, he sweeps by, blown far from his homeland in search of glory and honor. We walk in the garden of his turbulence.
Movie Joust. My name is Jesse Nussman, a film critic living here in Atlanta, Georgia, and with me on the other line, running around with their hands out, it's Jason Evans and Josh Sewell. I feel like I kind of butchered that joke. I should have done like a Naruto run joke, because that's basically what the little children are doing. Do you guys know why kids do that? Like, why do kids run like that? You guys are parents.
That looks nothing like any normal child I've ever seen run. And by the way, Zach Kreger said that someone asked him, "Oh, how'd you come up with that?" or anything, and he's like, I imagined it would look creepy. So, like, there's no reason for it. There's no hidden meaning. It just looks creepy.
It just looks like, you know, the videos of like the people that were like, we're going to Naruto run towards Area 51 back when that was a thing like 5 years ago. That's what I just kept thinking about throughout the entire movie.
And what movie is that, Jesse?
Yeah, we're talking Weapons this week. One of the most anticipated movies of the summer. This is the mysterious new horror thriller from writer-director Zach Kreger, who directed kind of the surprise hit Barbarian from back in 2022. I believe that's when that movie came out. And we've all seen the movie. I think we all really liked it and had a blast. I am looking forward to dissecting more of this movie for you guys. Do either one of you want to give a quick, just sort of like spoiler introduction or spoiler-free introduction to what the movie is? And then maybe we can kind of just quickly give do like a little 5 minutes of kind of spoiler-free convo, but then, you know, to talk about this movie, we're going to have to talk about this movie. And I think we all three agree it really is something that is best enjoyed going in as little knowing as possible. So do either of you care to kind of do your best to explain Weapons for someone who might not know what it is?
I can do it. I honestly, I think the best thing to do is just go with what is on the poster. Yeah. Right? And, you know, the poster says, and I'm trying to pull it up now, but my internet is being very slow.
I got it for you.
But it says last night at 2... Oh, go for it.
I was going to say, last night at 2:17 a.m., every child from Mrs. Gandy's class woke up, got out of bed, went downstairs, opened the front door, walked into the darkness, and they never came back. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need.
That is literally...
That's all you really need to know.
And
Is that the best, like, tagline to, or like setup to a movie in like the last 5 years? Like, I just, as soon as that was announced and like that first kind of like teaser of like the like Ring camera footage of the kids just running out into the night, like, I just really have to, like, you know, give an applause to Warner Brothers for marketing this movie and really selling it on kind of the mystery at its center, which is really, it's all you really need to know going
Absolutely,
into
I know we're going to spend most of our time, you know, talking about the actual film, as well we should, but like in a world where every poster is just a bunch of Photoshop floating heads, I really, really like what they've done with the marketing here, which is just creepy kids running through the street, some brief text telling you what you need to know, and, you know, let's keep some secrets, let's keep some mystery, and, you know, which... You know, I'm all for movies not telling you everything about the film in the trailer.
Yeah. This film, the film is all about the atmosphere. It's all about the creepy, the unsettling feeling. It's all about you looking at every corner of the screen because you're like, something's going to pop out from there or something's going to pop out from here. I mean, I was constantly doing that throughout this movie. And that poster and the way they've marketed it sells, that's what you're going to get. So, hey, tell me what I'm going to get and then deliver it to me. That's a good formula.
Yeah, keep doing that. I'll be happy.
I think, I think the secret to sort of sell this movie to people, even though that's kind of not our job, but, you know, if anyone,
Jesse,
like the joy of this movie.
If it's really good, our job is not just to say it's really good, it's to say, go see it because it's really good. So that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the key to what makes this movie so enjoyable to watch is this is a movie that is all about learning information and discovering the movie and unpacking the mystery as it goes along. This is a movie that, it, as we mentioned, it's best going in knowing as little as possible, and that way you're sort of figuring it out as it goes along, just like the characters. This is a story that is sort of bifurcated into different kind of segments that each follow a different character in this town as they begin sort of swirling around this mystery, and eventually all of these different characters are going to kind of come to a head. And really that makes for the best experience when you're sort of like, I don't know how this person connects to this part of the story, or how is this sort of flashback going to relate to like what we've seen thus far. And that is such apart from the parts of this movie that are shocking and scary or darkly funny, I think the real fun of watching this with an audience is that kind of collective bit of discovery. And when you find out like, oh shoot, we're at like this scene right now, kind of similar to, not to oversell this movie too much, but like when I hear people talking about when they saw like Pulp Fiction for the first time, and the bit of like the light bulb going off in your head of when you all of a sudden wind up at the diner at the end of that movie and you're like, oh, holy shit, that's how this is going to connect to, the thing from the beginning, and here's how all these pieces fit together. Or another movie I thought about was, structurally is Memento, the Christopher Nolan movie.
Dude, you're stealing my stuff.
That movie, the
we
fun of it.
Stealing my stuff.
I'm sorry. Why do you want to talk about why this is similar to the experience of watching Memento and discovering that movie in real time?
I wouldn't say it's quite the same as Memento, because Memento is so brilliant.
It's not structurally
it's so brilliant in the way it tells the story backwards that, we don't need to sell Memento, but the moment where suddenly Carrie-Anne Moss's character goes from being like a good guy to a bad guy because we suddenly discover something in literally, I guess, in a flashback or, in the storytelling going backwards, we discover something about her, I think is one of the great moments in cinema in the past 25 years. The current movie or somewhat current movie that I would compare this to is Strange Darling, which came out last year.
Okay, yeah.
And that's another one where it's like, you don't need to know a lot about it, but this is a story where the mystery is going to play out over time, and because of the way we're telling the story, sort of out of order, different perspectives, different point of view, you're going to get different pieces of the story in different ways from a straightforward, regular narrative where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yes, there's a beginning, middle, and end on this story, but we experience those things in such different ways than usual that it heightens your attention to the film. It adds to your sense of sort of being a little uncomfortable and uneasy, and like you're discovering this the same way the characters on screen are. It just makes it's a more complex storytelling and better storytelling. And man, Zach Cregger, for him to do this with his second film, sort of like Chris Nolan doing Memento with his second film, it's really impressive.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about the obvious parallels, Zach Cregger himself has brought up what a big influence Magnolia was on this film from Paul Thomas Anderson. Just the various, character perspectives. But if I can get like super film nerdy for a second, there's clearly a ton of Rashomon in here, the Kurosawa film, where a character that you view, like Jason was saying with Memento, a character you view in one light, when you're suddenly seeing them from a different perspective, you're like, oh, this poor lady that is just the scapegoat for this thing. You're like, oh, no, I can see why people are mad at her because of what she's doing. It may not have been this thing we thought she did, but, the way she's acting, you can totally see why parents are a little upset with her. And then you've got, oh, well, this dad who's just being evil to this person because he's grieving, he's a jerk. And then you're like, oh, no, he's actually pretty cool because he's putting some stuff together that nobody else is. It's really cool how it keeps you on your toes and keeps you consistently reevaluating every character you've met.
Yeah, I think the Magnolia comparison has been interesting because I sort of get what Cregger means when he's saying it, of like he wrote like a big ensemble movie, but I think the one bit of clarification I'd give to people on that is like, this doesn't sort of like there's something about Magnolia that it's just like swirling chaos the entire time, and you're sort of constantly cutting between all of these different characters, and like the movie almost like feels like it's gonna like fall apart at the seams, and it's just sort of like gradually building and building and building. This movie, I think, like the way it's playing structurally is, you know, you sort of follow one character, and then just as sort of the situation is sort of like spiraling out of control or something shocking is about to happen, Kreger will just sort of like divert your attention, and then we're going to another character. And that's such a smart way of like, this movie's very like compartmentalized in a way that you know, Barbarian kind of was, and the way that, you know, as Jason says, like you're sort of on the edge of your seat and constantly looking across the frame and paying attention to the information that's being given to you, in a similar way to Barbarian of like, you know, I have no idea where this story is heading, because every 15 minutes or so we'll just sort of shift perspective, and suddenly we're following a completely other character. And it isn't until like, you know, a while into this next section that you figure out like, oh, how is this going to sort of maneuver into the larger story? And that it's very smart as a way to sort of like constantly keep you on the edge of your seat and constantly guessing about what's going to come next. Is Kreger's really good at just sort of pivoting at the right moment, and pivoting at the moment where you're at your most sort of on edge. And I just thought that it's a really like, this is one of the better screenplays this year in just terms of like really organizing a movie around like anticipation and suspense and pivoting at the right moment to sort of keep you hooked in a way.
I mean, should we get to the spoilerific kind of conversation?
Yes. Spoilers around. If you haven't seen Weapons, go see it. Here's the siren. We're going to talk about spoilers now. All right, so guys, how do you want to sort of break into this? Should we go character by character, which is kind of as the movie is sort of laid out? You're first following Julia Garner as this teacher of the class that has largely vanished except for one student. There is a father of one of the vanished students played by Josh Brolin. There's also a police officer played by Alden Ehrenreich, a section of the movie that clearly that character is just totally designed off of John C. Reilly in Magnolia. And then there's also the drug addict character. And then
there's the school principal played by Benedict Wong.
The school principal.
Yeah.
Who's great. And then the final section of the movie is we learn what has been happening to the one child who was essentially like left behind and didn't disappear.
His name is Alex,
along with all these other children's. Yes, really good child performance.
Definitely.
I think. So, what do you guys think about like the cast and kind of the individual performances within this movie, and kind of Kreger's choice to sort of switch perspectives kind of every, I don't know, like 20 minutes or so?
So I'll start by saying I love Julia Garner. I mean, I've loved her. I was addicted to Ozark, and she's great in that. And I actually think the character she's playing here is not entirely different from her character on Ozark, in that, you know, like she wants to be good, but she has trouble being good at times. You know, sympathetic, but not I don't know. She can defend herself. I adore her and adore her performances in everything that she does. She's having a good summer. She's the Silver Surfer in the Fantastic Four movie. I don't think that's a particularly interesting role for someone of her quality. So I'm thrilled that she gets this. If anybody,
I'm sure it pays for a nice house.
If anybody's the lead, I guess probably she's the lead, but it's very much an ensemble piece. And yeah, he's collected a really nice group of actors who I think all do a very good job. We didn't mention Amy Madigan plays Alex, the little boy, plays his aunt.
Oh my God.
And man, that is
did not even recognize her when she first came up, like I had to like look up. I was like, who played the witch? Like she was really good, and I think manages to, sort of land on this nice tonal balance that I really want to talk about with the movie. That is both sort of like gets the menace and the fear of it, but also there's something like ridiculous and comical about her character that you kind of want to laugh at.
The
like,
movie's really funny.
About,
the movie has several really funny moments.
Funny.
It really is.
Yeah. I mean, her character, I thought a lot about, the next door neighbors in Rosemary's Baby, and how sort of ridiculous and heightened they are, and how they first show up, and you're like, why the frick are they like dressed this way, and they're so comical and like clownish, and yet as the movie goes on, you see this more like menace kind of come out, and I just think like, that last climax of the movie with all the children running around and chasing her,
unbelievable,
is probably like some of the probably like one of the standout scenes of the year, and one of the funniest, most grotesque things I've seen in a movie.
Well, I just want to point out, one of the things I love about this film is that because of the humor, it disarms a little bit of the horror. Like, it's still a scary movie. It's still a incredibly unsettling movie, and I was on the edge of my seat throughout it. But having the humor, especially at the end there, with the kids literally chasing Amy Madigan, they're crashing through windows. It's unbelievable to watch. It's so funny that it relieves some of the terror. And like, I was the guy who's saying like, I'm not going to sleep for a week after this. I slept fine. I slept fine the very first night. It's not that kind of scary movie. And thank you, Zach Kreger, for doing that for people like me, so we can appreciate and enjoy this film.
But see, I think that's to its strength, though, because I know we have, I know we're going to talk later about this in more detail, but, we've gone through this period of horror where it's just, what's scary? Unrelentingly bleak trauma where there's no light at all. Glad. And this is
I'm so glad you brought
this
up.
This is a movie where, like, yes, horrible things happen. Yes, there's trauma, but it is a story with interesting characters who aren't just metaphors. There are people that you can relate to, that you can identify with. They're flawed. They're not perfect humans and perfect villains, And there's also like a plot, an ongoing storyline with a mystery that draws you in and you want to keep following it, rather than just sort of like marking time until the next gross out kill or whatever. This is even if this wasn't a horror movie, even if this was just like a dark thriller like Prisoners or something, it would still be a good movie. Kind of like how if Sinners didn't have vampires, if Sinners was still just like, a Prohibition era story about these two brothers trying to start a business, it would still be really good. The vampires are a nice bonus. Weapons is the same way.
Yeah, I really want to like unpack that more of like, I love that point you brought up, Josh, because I want to kind of like talk about this movie in the context of where horror is at the moment. And, I think I'm someone who probably watches more depraved horror movies than you guys do, but, has managed to be the most reliable genre at the movies for, decades at this point. And, we talked about last week about comedy and how that's sort of a failing genre at the Cineplex, and the joy we had watching Naked Gun with an audience. And there's been a couple movies this summer that I really think the sort of trauma porn is kind of, I think people are kind of getting a little sick of it, in the way that like there's almost been this like post-Hereditary trend of people like taking the wrong lessons from like Ari Aster, of like, every horror movie now needs to be, about, someone like working through their inner turmoil, and that needs to be like
personal
the
pain,
the movie. Yeah. Right. The joke of like Jamie Lee Curtis on the Halloween press tours, like every year, just being like, trauma. It's about trauma. It's about wounded trauma. And like, I don't know. Did you guys see what was there was a movie earlier this year from the same guys that made Talk to Me.
Bring Her Back.
Yeah, did you guys check that out?
Because I heard it was all trauma all the time. So I was like, you know what? I'm good.
The Philippou brothers, right? Isn't that who
that feels like Yeah. And that felt like kind of a breaking point for me of normally don't mind this stuff, but that there was something about like how brutal and unrelenting and just sort of like wallowing in the trauma of its characters that just sort of felt like a crutch, and you just kind of walked out of that movie being like, ugh, that was a rough sit. And like there wasn't anything added other than just sort of mercilessly like beating you over the head. And then in the other corner, something like, I don't know if you guys saw the recent reboot legacy sequel of I Know What You Did Last Summer, which almost like lays the trauma on to the most comical degree possible. And that is trying to be like a, big studio kind of summer slasher movie, and is like has full-on scenes where people are like in front of a whiteboard like explaining what trauma is to you and like all the motivations behind all the characters is trauma, and like, but without even getting into the seriousness of it. Do you guys kind of feel the same way? I just feel like the since Hereditary, since Get Out even, I feel like there's been this sort of need to like, or this realization among people in Hollywood of like, oh, we can use horror as this sort of allegory and vessel to talk about traumatic things in people's lives, or to talk about societal fears and issues in the way of Get Out. But I feel like it's kind of led to a lot of just sort of flat or depressing movies that don't bother to get into like the nitty gritty of what those feelings are and just sort of use it as wallpaper. Does that kind of make sense?
Even with something like Get Out, Jordan Peele understands the importance of tension relief and resolution. It's not like we're just going to wallow in this for 2.5 hours. And, Weapons could have been, it's like, what's more traumatic than losing a child? And yeah, obviously, what could be more traumatic than losing a child? But that's like taking the nuclear version of let's kill a dog to make people sad, But Weapons understands like, what's better than child trauma? All of those kids ripping the lady apart who did this, right? Like, and he doesn't, and he doesn't tie everything up with a big bow at the end. He doesn't end this with, and they all lived happily ever after. But he still sends the audience out with a feeling of resolution and a feeling of, okay, I don't have to wallow in this, because when the credits were over, the story ended. It's like, oh no, we're going to make you keep feeling bad about this for the next week. It's like, no, the movie's a shared experience. We shared it together. It was fun. It was scary. And then when it's over, the continuing experience is us talking about how cool and interesting it was, not how bad it made us feel.
Well, I kind of, Josh, you kind of mentioned this. It's not a happy ending. I was sure that when the kids rip Amy Madigan apart, literally rip her limb from limb.
In graphic detail.
Right. And then we cut to Julia Garner, and she's like in the house, and she's approaching where the little boy Alex is with his parents. I was sure that we were going to see the parents hugging him. And I was like, oh, it's going to, it's a natural, and I'm not saying it would have been a bad ending to do it that way, but for it instead to be the parents are back to being mostly comatose, and, they're not attacking anymore. The kids aren't attacking anymore, but everyone's not all better. It's not like, hey, yay, it's all done. I thought that felt honest to the story. The witch, Amy Madigan's character, it's never really, by the way, I love the fact the movie doesn't bother to explain everything. Like,
yeah, she doesn't get an origin.
Right. And we don't get the, what exactly is her, she's, it appeared to me, my guess is she has cancer or something else, and she's sort of sucking the life force out of these different people as a way of staying alive, because she looks worse. Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, it's I was talking about this with my girlfriend last night, and saying what you were just mentioning, Jason, of like loving that things didn't get explained and just sort of like being like it's a grim
Yeah.
fairy tale. Like
Yeah.
it reminded me of like Hansel and Gretel and stuff, and trusting you as an audience of like, okay, let's take that kind of creepy folk fairy tale thing. It's this very Stephen King idea of like taking that kind of old folk fairy tale thing and putting it into the suburbs and letting it be this sort of stand-in for sort of suburban fears and things like that.
Yeah, this is very much a combination of, we keep name checking all these other films, but it really is like Kreger's taking all these films, putting them in a blender, and giving us something that feels original. But like you said, a lot of Stephen King's It in here, a lot of John Carpenter's Halloween, which is the other coming in to upset the suburban ideal.
The other thing I love about it is, and this is going to seem weird to say in a film about people being possessed by a witch and the such. I thought the characters, for the most part, were very real.
Yeah,
and I mean, like, I almost stood up and applauded when the homeless drug addict guy, the street burglar guy, when we first see him and he's walking along and he's trying the door of every single car he walks by to see if he can grab something out of it. I was like, God damn, that I bet that I've never been that person, and I don't know a lot of people like that, but I was like, that's not an essential part of the story, but it tells us a reality about that character and who he is.
Yeah.
And I love that the thing that brings the characters into the story is their own fault.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Kreger has sort of written these, very kind of complicated, damaged people, and it's sort of them not kind of being able to get out of their own way, and that sort of drags them into this, terrifying, at times hilarious and, grotesque situation throughout the movie. And I love that as an idea of like, these people cannot help themselves and sort of their own like personal issues. I'm thinking a lot about.
I was just going to say,
cop, which is like that's probably my favorite section of the movie. Of just this guy that's going through all this inner turmoil, is in an unhappy marriage, is like a recovering alcoholic, has like all this internal rage in him, and that just sort of like leading him to this house where he basically like becomes possessed and all the horrible thing, becomes a weapon to the witch in the way.
I was just really quick going to say about Alden Ehrenreich. I loved his scene with Julia Garner in the bar where she's like, have a drink, and he's like, no, I really can't. And then we cut to his POV, and his POV essentially starts with him like, in bed with her, waking up the next morning being like, hungover. It just tells you so much in so little time. I love that.
Yeah, and to continue with the Ehrenreich thing, I know we're all kind of bummed about what happened with Solo, but career-wise,
he lucked out.
I think that's the best thing to happen to him, because it's proved like he is much better in these interesting character roles rather than sort of like matinee idols. I know they may not pay the same salary, but he's so much more interesting in roles like this as the good-looking guy who is, it feels like he sort of coasted on his looks for a while, but when it's time for him to like actually back it up and have some substance, you can see that that's where he stumbles. And the other thing I was going to say is to kind of keep continuing this idea of the reality of the characters. I think that's what makes Amy Madigan so effective in the last third of the film, is that when she shows up, she's coming in from this whole different movie.
Oh man, yeah.
Right? Everybody else, they may not be, they make dumb decisions, just like people. How many times were we saying, you idiot, why are you peeking through this window? Well, because that's what a person in this situation would probably do.
They can't help themselves.
And so, because they're realistic in that way, when you see Amy Madigan come in, and even before you know her role in the film, she's just some Looney Tune that came in from out of nowhere, you're like, what is happening? And it just makes you put your guard
right,
up.
she's
even
almost
more.
a joke, and then that character becomes more and
Yes.
more menacing and scary as the movie goes
And so
on.
I think it's a really good move on Kreger's part to ground her insanity and otherworldliness in such realistic characters.
So one thing I want to bring up before we go, because I know we're approaching like half an hour at this point and probably could talk longer, but I want to talk about themes and ideas, because that was one of the things that was going through my head. Jason, you, my girlfriend who is there, and I kind of talked about one sequence in particular where it's the dream sequence where Josh Brolin wakes up in his son's room and follows his son outside, and I believe follows him. Is it to the house where they're being held in the basement?
I don't think it's the exact house.
Their house
it's just
from the outside.
It's just sort of where he loses track of his son along the way, and it is in front of a house, but it didn't look to me like it was the exact house. That to me, that would have been a little too spot on. Yeah.
I think it's more just like where the Ring
this
camera loses the kid or something.
Okay, yeah. So he gets to this house, and then we see like this like massive object kind of moving in the sky, and it is this massive AR-15 with the time of when the kids left on it, and it's not something that's explained at all through the movie. I think Kreger has even in interviews sort of been like, I threw that in there as kind of a David Lynch, a David Lynch homage of just sort of like something unexplainable that like I was just sort of creepy to him. But it did bring up these conversations about like, it brought up some of my more like mixed feelings. I want to preface, I really, really like this movie and think like it is one of the more fun things I've seen in a theater, but it did maybe that scene has been a little frustrating to me, and I'm curious like if you guys have any ideas on any sort of subtextual readings of what this movie is about, or if it's just sort of like a fun, expertly constructed genre piece. Because I kind of walked out and feeling like that scene, seeing that weapon, it sort of brought to mind feelings about school shootings and the ways that can have impacts on the communities around them. I mean, we had one here in not too in the Atlanta area just last year, and was we were able to see firsthand of just the impact that has on like the community around them, and it made me wonder whether this movie is kind of purposely dealing with that subject matter, and in a way that sort of frustrated me a little bit, of being like, that actually would be a pretty good idea, and I kind of wish Kreger like went a little further in it, but I feel like it's something he kind of nods to, if unintentionally, and it maybe left me with a bit of like, this movie is really fun and really well written and well directed, but I kind of feel like there's some thematic meat that's being like left on the bone that would have maybe made for a really exceptional genre movie that I think would rank, and again, it's in the same year as such stuff like Sinners and 28 Years Later, these genre movies that are dealing with these very like heavy thematic ideas and exploring them throughout their runtime. And this felt like a movie that kind of brushed up against some like real life horrors, but then just sort of chose to be kind of a more sort of streamlined piece of entertainment. So I'm giving the floor to you guys. That's my little spiel. Do you have any other readings of the movie, readings of that scene, thoughts on what I just said?
All right, so I'll start and I'll say this. I'm not going to fault the movie or fault Zach Kreger for not trying to do something more than the outstanding, really enjoyable, really fun to talk about and watch film that he made. That said, you're right. And I think of a film like Sinners. I think of a film like Get Out, which are Get Out won our film critics group, the Atlanta Film Critics Circle, made Get Out the movie of the year, the number one movie of the year when it came out a few years ago. I think Sinners is going to be a film that's certainly going to compete for that title this year. And Sinners is probably going to be, in the conversation for Oscars and stuff, the same way Get Out was. I don't think that this film is going to reach that level. And I think part of the reason why is because Kreger didn't try to do a little bit more to give us a little more of a think kind of thing, a political, social kind of statement that we can hang, a little more emotion on at the end. Again, I don't fault him for doing that. There's nothing wrong with making a great movie that people are going to love watching. But yeah, you're right. I mean, had he maybe wanted to explore a little bit more of, the way guns, the way weapons, the way children are impacted by these things, that would have been really interesting. I don't know that this story would have lended itself to it perfectly. And maybe if he attempted to do that, he ruins the really great thing he already has. Maybe the pursuit of the perfection or near perfection ruins something really, really damn good. So, okay, you don't have to do that, buddy. But the reason this is not probably going to end up as my number one film of the year is because there are other movies that take on something a little tiny bit more challenging. And I think it's a valid criticism, although it's still a great movie.
I mean, I don't know. I think that Kreger is, if you've listened to some other interviews, he said he's really not a messaging kind of guy. He's just
that's fine.
He said he thought it. I'm getting there. He's that he thought of like creepy images and he leaves it up to the audience to sort of connect the dots and draw their own picture. Plenty of movies do that, and I think in the long run, playing the long game, I think that's going to turn out well for him because, I mean, not to put it on the same level yet, this was 45 years ago, but, when Kubrick made The Shining, surface level, that is a movie about a family that moves into a haunted hotel, dad goes crazy, tries to kill the family. There's no inherent message in that. But think of all the different readings that we've put into that movie over the course of 45 years. Because Kubrick was just like, this is my movie, figure it out. I think Kreger's going to have something similar here. Again, not comparing Kreger to Kubrick yet. It's, but the idea that he's like, no, this is some cool, creepy stuff. I threw it in there because I thought it made it interesting. It's up to you to connect those dots and see if you can find some deeper meaning for yourself in that. I'm totally fine with that.
So, guys, do you have any last weapons thoughts before we kind of wrap up for this episode?
I'm just glad.
It's really great.
Yeah.
Are you excited? Are you excited about Zach Kreger doing Resident Evil next? That's what it sounds like.
Maybe I
saw that. Wait.
He'll make a good one, maybe.
Well, I saw this. I was bummed. I was like, why is he going to play in existing IP land? He doesn't need to go to something where there's already sort of built-in mythology and the such. This guy, he's clearly shown that he can come up with stories on his own.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about Jordan Peele is that Jordan Peele is making movies that are wholly original, everything about them. And
well, but he's also, lending his producing name to Candyman remakes. Like everybody's got to eat. So maybe this is Zach Kreger's one for them, one for me kind of thing.
Maybe. I mean, yeah. I sort of don't have much of an opinion on him, like, right now, other than, like, this movie has confirmed to me of, like, I like this about the same as Barbarian, and just sort of, like, this guy's, like, a really great entertainer, and I don't know that I'm necessarily, feel the same way about him as to use Peele as an example of Peele as someone who has demonstrated he's a great entertainer, but also, I think, like, Nope in particular is a movie that, like, every year I'm just sort of like, that might be his best movie and is, like, one of the best movies I think of this decade thus far, and is just, there's more and more, a movie that I'm constantly, like, discovering new things inside and new ideas and new things that it's about. And even that's sort of a movie that, when I remember our critics screening, like, walking out, and I was like, hell yes, and all these other, like, lots of people around me being like, wait, so what does this thing mean, and what's that, and, like, what is he saying, and stuff, and I wonder, the legacy of this movie will be interesting, and I hope that this movie I would love for this movie to have that same feeling that I got with Nope of, like, not just an exhilarating experience, but something that can be discovered and more stuff to excavate from it. but maybe Krieger is just like a really, talented, maybe he's closer to like a James Wan, and just a really talented genre filmmaker, or a Mike Flanagan or someone like that, of just sort of like really knows the genre and knows how to play the audience like a fiddle.
There you go.
I mean, I'll say this. Even though I sat here and I lamented Zach Kreger going for existing IP with Resident Evil, Resident Evil is a franchise that, the Evil Corporation is certainly fertile ground for him to create something really interesting. I hope he doesn't feel like he has to make the same kind of film, the same kind of themes as existed in the series, in the original ones.
Yeah.
And if he just uses it as sort of as a launching pad to being even bigger and even better known, then I'm cool with that. This dude's a really, really smart storyteller, and I just don't want him.
Definitely.
I don't want him to get trapped in a box or anything like that. I mean, we have pulled out a ton of big names when on this podcast, when functionally comparing Zach Kreger to them at various moments. I went Christopher Nolan. We were talking Memento, and I just hope he continues on a great path. It'd be nice to get another great director.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, guys, this has been fun. Jason, unfortunately, you are going to Naruto run into the night and not be seen for a few weeks. But Josh, you and I will be back here hopefully next week to talk about Spike Lee and his reuniting with Denzel Washington to remake Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, but setting it in the hip-hop world. And I don't know, maybe we'll talk about Darren Aronofsky, and then we'll have the fall festivals coming up, and I think it's going to be a really interesting fall at the movies. There's a lot of really big name filmmakers that have very exciting movies for us to talk about.
Can't wait.
Everybody go see Weapons.